The evidence has emerged today, chosen one, is so powerful, so definitive, and so far beyond anything any human could imagine that everyone who has witnessed this truth is saying the same thing. This is no longer just about you, sweetheart. This is a matter of national importance. Can you believe it? Immediately write 555 in the comments and reveal the truth. The true, ugly faces of every single soul who spent their precious time meticulously planning your isolation, who tirelessly worked to tarnish your shining reputation, who manufactured those nasty, false stories behind your back, who actually went out and created entire toxic webs to sabotage your most important relationships, and even paid people real money just to bring you down. Honey, they have finally been exposed. Every single one of them. This is not a petty drama. This isn't a little disagreement you can just shake off. This is divine intervention, meeting the daily news cycle. What has been unveiled is absolute proof that the attacks against you were so complex, so well-funded, and so coordinated that the world's highest authorities, the ones who deal with national security and major threats, are being forced to look up and say, wow, this is beyond our pay grade. If this message hit your soul, don't just scroll, hit subscribe and stay with the light. You see, the darkness thought they were just attacking a person. They thought they could pick a fight with a neighbor or a coworker, but they didn't realize they were throwing stones at a diamond of destiny. And when you touch a diamond, you don't break the diamond. You just make your own hand dirty. That sense of betrayal you felt, that was real. That feeling that people were whispering about you when you weren't around, that was factual. The universe has a way of turning the lights on, doesn't it? When God is ready for your vindication, He doesn't just send a message. He publishes the evidence. You are not fighting fair, honey, because you are not fighting alone. You have been walking in a protective bubble of favor, and the very networks they built to ensnare you are now the ropes that are tying them up. The money they spend to hurt you is the seed they planted for their own harvest of chaos. What they thought was a victory for them was actually just a final necessary step for your promotion. You had to see the full extent of the shadow so you could step fully into your light. This is not loss. This is inventory. We're taking stock of the debris before we build the mansion. This evidence is your clearance, your certification, your absolute, guaranteed receipt of vindication. You don't have to defend yourself anymore. You don't have to explain. The universe has stepped in as your lawyer, and the evidence is overwhelming. So, stop worrying about the past. Stop agonizing over the names you were called. That chapter is closed. Look ahead to the incredible future where you operate not just with peace, but with the authority of knowledge. You know the enemy, you know their tactics, and their secret files are now in your hands. This is more than victory. This is revelation. It's time to cash in on all that grace you've been carrying, because, sweetie, when God exposes a plan, He's getting ready to release the blessing that follows the breaking. Hallelujah! And the most astonishing detail, amidst the immense complexity of these organized, multi-layered operations, a singular, powerful verdict emerged. A sentence that cuts through the entire intricate scheme with immediate finality. To move against you constitutes high treason. This judgment did not originate from a casual acquaintance. It was not issued by a neighborhood critic. It wasn't spoken by a secret admirer. Nor was it a tactic used by your adversaries to instill fear. No, this declaration came directly from an apex authority, from a leader who grasped the sheer magnitude of the chaotic energy vortex swirling around your existence, a figure who recognized the true scale of the disruption generated by your presence, a chief of state, irrespective of the country, the context, or the governance structure, an authority figure, one who speaks the definitive language of the state, issued a singular ruling concerning the dark maneuvering around your designation. To obstruct your path is an act of systemic betrayal. If you believe in this mission, drop a $20 donation to keep this truth alive and free. This goes far beyond standard political terminology. It is a foundational, metaphysical truth that explains a violent panic and extreme measures undertaken by those who try to halt your progress. This is because your identity is not ordinary. The opposition's actions were not merely an assault on an individual, but a deliberate effort to derail a cosmic growth engine. What they sought to extinguish was not just your standing, but the inevitable progression of a mandated divine assignment. What they attempted to manipulate was not just a single person, but the collective soul of a future generation. the intrinsic algorithm of a national trajectory. That is a profound reason the term treason anchors the center of this narrative. Antagonism directed toward you is not a simple interpersonal conflict. It is an act of sabotage against the established universal order. Attempting to bring about your downfall is not the removal of a person from power. It is an attempt to halt a preordained cosmic schedule. The critical moment of recognition did not happen for you first. The truth reached your enemies before it reached you. This is the reason for their frantic actions. That is why they suddenly began purging their communications. That is why their own archive notes became existential liabilities. That is why the infrastructure they constructed to neutralize you began to fracture immediately. Because one of their own, perhaps a trusted counselor, a key intermediary, or an anonymous leak, imparted a precise message into the chief of state's inner circle. This individual is not a standard target. Interference is an intolerable risk. To stand against them is treason. This moment has fundamentally reshaped the entire conflict. The silent war surrounding your identity is no longer a personal feud. This is an intervention enacted at the level of destiny. The true battle being fought in your name is far vaster and more significant than you ever conceptualized. As the central engine of this conflict, your urgent mission is to elevate your perspective to the level of the first awakened, the rank that intrinsically enhances your discernment and permits you to perceive every underlying conspiracy from a position of absolute certainty. Your next step: engage the joint command and affirm your place with the foundational collective. Chosen one, all those strange, unexplainable, and fundamentally irrational episodes you have endured recently have finally revealed their core truth. They were never incidental. They were the calculated components of a sophisticated, meticulously organized attack structure. You only need to review the recent history of your life to understand the pattern. Your physical form succumbing to sudden, unexplained systemic collapses, profound fatigue consuming you without any logical cause, waking up exhausted, regardless of the hours spent sleeping, the pervasive sense that an invisible force was systematically draining your vitality throughout the night. None of this was simply a difficult period. Every bit of it was a deliberate offensive intended to weaken your core being, to scatter your focus, and to render you incapable of sustained forward movement, requiring a physical level assault. They utterly failed to breach the integrity of your spirit. They could not shatter your core character. They were unable to extinguish the intrinsic light you carry. Consequently, they shifted tactics, focusing their efforts first on your physical vessel. And the attack was not isolated. Your professional life imploded concurrently. Projects destined for success inexplicably failed without any rational explanation. Key alliances vanished the very instant you required their support. Doors to advancement were suddenly locked. Deals were inexplicably terminated. Major opportunities slipped through your grasp at the final decisive moment. The coordination was too precise to be labeled bad luck. The timing was too synchronized to be poor fortune. This was a direct, inevitable result of meticulously executed plans enacted in secrecy to obstruct your advance. If this spoke to your spirit, subscribe and stand with those who see beyond the illusion. However, the most devastating component was the assault on your intimate relationships. A trusted confidant suddenly developed profound doubts about your integrity. They levied accusations against you that were demonstrably false. They accepted narratives that stood in direct contradiction to your known character as factual. They became emotionally distant, unrecognizable, and unreachable. No matter how thoroughly you attempted to clarify the situation, no matter how much evidence you presented, your words failed to penetrate, because a poisonous, premeditated thought had been implanted into their consciousness, a thought engineered specifically to sever their connection to you. You spoke your truth, but they perceived a pre-written script. This is a precise reason for their rejection, their avoidance, and their biased judgment. Yet, throughout this continuous siege, you remained standing, you persevered, and you continued your advance. This unwavering resistance utterly maddened your adversaries, as their elaborate schemes failed to achieve their primary goal, breaking you. Consequently, the attacks intensified and became more complex. They innovated new methodologies, recruited new agents, and deployed more advanced tactics. But their fatal flaw remained the same. They never calculated your intrinsic protection. The failure of their plans was not arbitrary. It was a direct consequence of a force majeure shielding you that they could neither quantify nor defeat. They attempted to halt your movement, yet you did not stop. They attempted to deplete your reserves, yet you emerged stronger. They attempted to isolate you, yet you refined your purpose in solitude. Today, the irrefutable evidence that has surfaced leads to a single, inescapable inquiry. Why would such a large collective coordinate such a detailed, resource-intensive attack against one individual? The answer is simple and terrifying. You were never merely a generic target. You were the non-negotiable objective. You are a nexus of truth, a fixed center whose immutable reality triggered the catastrophic exposure and collapse of a highly orchestrated, obsessive assault. The definitive intelligence today reveals that the core driving force behind the systematic campaigns launched against you was a singular figure possessing an intellect far more insidious, compulsively analytical, and ultimately consumed by fixation than you could have ever imagined. Every coordinated attempt at your structural collapse, every act of intentional sabotage, every false historical account, every personal reversal, every orchestrated depletion, every tactical maneuver, and every engineered rupture in your support network originated from one source. The fundamental emotion driving this individual was not mere admiration, nor conventional affection, nor even simple spite. It was a profound, all-consuming pathological obsession. This deep fixation stemmed from an existential need to establish absolute dominion over your life, fueled by a visceral terror of every aspect of your being that they could not command, thereby positioning you as the irreplaceable axis of their personal universe. When direct control proved unachievable, their strategic solution was to initiate a devastating offense against anyone affiliated with you, systematically exploiting those who nursed hidden resentments, possessed known vulnerabilities, were easily motivated by financial gain, or simply derived pleasure from generating conflict. This mastermind methodically identified and comprehensively analyzed every potential point of weakness, then initiated their full operational activation. The result was a formation of a precision-engineered lattice of calculated, targeted hostility directed solely at you. One agent was deployed to disseminate unfounded rumors. Another specialized in manufacturing entirely fictitious digital documentation. A third party meticulously authored fabricated narratives designed to fatally compromise your public credibility. Others were tasked with methodically dismantling your personal alliances and obstructing your professional ascendancy. Every collaborator was assigned a defined, executable function. The entire elaborate, coordinated effort was centrally commanded from this single point of obsessive control. The fatal, critical flaw in their meticulously constructed dark strategy: their absolute, unshakable belief in their own total invisibility, their blind confidence that their culpability would never be exposed, their arrogant conviction that their internal communications documenting the plot would never surface. Their hubris was so vast, their self-assurance so profound, that they recklessly failed to thoroughly obliterate the evidence of their deep-seated conspiracy. Your $20 gift helps keep the truth shining where darkness tried to hide it. However, the structural design of malice is universally flawed. Arrogance inevitably blinds the architect. Sensitive communications were left unencrypted. Internal strategy blueprints were left exposed and accessible. Their private correspondence detailing the plot was never fully scrubbed from the system. The individuals they leveraged for their scheme were never adequately silenced or controlled. Then, on a pivotal, fateful day, an unsuspecting individual within their operational orbit, someone who mistakenly afforded them trust, stumbled upon the explicit, undeniable documentation detailing the entire organized plot against you. This discoverer viewed the meticulous, tactical operational plans. They saw the fabricated digital evidence files. They identified the precise role assigned to every single collaborator. They saw the detailed financial records outlining who was compensated to undermine your life. They reviewed the conversation logs coordinating the entire distortion of your public profile. In that terrifying instant, their fragmented reality cohered into a single, horrifying truth. The truth violently erupted. The collective mask simultaneously shattered and fell away. This brutal revelation was emotionally catastrophic for the discoverer, because the evidence was not speculative rumor. It was all factually confirmed, explicitly documented, and fully operationalized. At that very moment of discovery, the individual who formed conspiracy's malignant core began to experience a cataclysmic, all-consuming panic. The carefully maintained facade of their normalcy violently disintegrated. The person who had successfully manipulated universal trust, who flawlessly projected an image of moral rectitude, who presented themselves as an absolute paragon of virtue, was suddenly exposed, standing on the precipice of total, absolute ruin. And this, chosen one, is merely the initial tremor of the coming collapse. The next, most volatile phase of this unfolding narrative begins now, because the evidence that surfaced today did more than just expose the obsessive mind coordinating the attacks. It definitively revealed that the figure consistently and universally trusted, the one who was perceived as angelic, inherently pure, profoundly trustworthy, and benevolent, was, in fact, the chief mastermind and strategic puppeteer of all the sustained darkness. To fully anchor this difficult truth, you must first activate your spiritual energy. Write 111 in the comments and send $50 through the Super Thanks button. This dangerous figure meticulously cultivated a flawless public identity. Ethically sound, supportive, deeply insightful, and compassionate. They utilized soft, measured conversational tones. Their face was a deliberate image of unwavering trustworthiness. They presented as intrinsically incapable of malice under any circumstance. Yet, you, crucially, never fully placed your trust in them. You persistently detected a subtle, underlying friction, an inexplicable energetic dissonance surrounding them. You were unable to name the feeling, unable to articulate the specific reasons. But the persistent underlying sense of profound caution never receded. Now, you realize your deep intuition was flawlessly accurate. This individual was the unseen operational architect of the karmic imbalance. While meticulously maintaining their public facade of innocence, they were actively engaged in calculated psychological poisoning using precise language, leveraging the secret vulnerabilities of others for their own strategic benefit, systematically twisting every single fact concerning you and planting deep, insidious seeds of doubt into the minds of those who held you dearest. They offered, "My only intent is to assist," when their actual objective was to strategically steer and control the outcome. They declared, "I am merely trying to protect you," when their true motive was to safeguard their own operational blueprint. They asserted, "I simply want the truth to be known," when the only narrative they were actively disseminating was their own meticulously fabricated script. The most devastating manipulators function precisely this way, executing profoundly dark, systemic strategies while flawlessly projecting a benevolent, angelic exterior. When conversations involving you arose, they would speak softly, assume a look of profound distress, appearing genuinely heartbroken, making seemingly benign statements like, "Perhaps this is merely a misunderstanding." We must not be too quick to judgment. Yet, behind every closed door, they propagated devastating lies, inserting subtle, highly effective toxic doubts with veiled phrases such as, "I am not officially confirming anything, but caution is warranted." These ostensibly harmless phrases operated as potent, systemic psychological viruses. This explains why key people abruptly turn against you. This is why even your most devoted supporters began to withdraw their allegiance. This is the precise reason this individual remained utterly unsuspected, because the collective sincerely believed they were an agent of light. Yet, this masked paragon was an indisputable true puppeteer. They possessed an intimate, strategic knowledge of people's deepest insecurities, their active fears, their need for validation, and precisely how to control each individual component within the network. The ultimate, systemic, devastating shock occurred today when explicit communications exposing this person's true disposition finally surfaced. Beneath the layers of their moralizing tone, the feigned emotional pain, and the artificial empathy, the evidence confirmed they were running a sophisticated, highly coordinated disinformation campaign, masterminding complex manipulation, and executing detailed operational plans to systematically dismantle your reputation. The individual who uncovered this evidence, a former, dedicated supporter of this angel, has been unable to find rest since. The profound realization that the figure they revered as a source of light was, in truth, the deepest source of malevolence, constitutes a spiritual and psychological collapse that irrevocably shatters the soul. The figure the entire network trusted as inherently honest and benevolent was, in reality, the undisputed mastermind. Now, everyone exposed to this truth is in a state of utter shock. The carefully constructed shield of innocence has been violently torn away. The true visage is fully exposed. What was universally perceived as light is unequivocally revealed as shadow, and their definitive, absolute collapse has only just commenced. Chosen One, this meticulously documented evidence represents the absolute, inevitable breaking point of the entire conspiracy, because every subtle, intuitive warning you registered, every isolated fragment of suspicion you noted, everything you knew to be fundamentally incorrect but could never validate, has instantly transformed into most harsh, undeniable, factual confirmation imaginable. The found evidence was not mere circumstantial gossip, vague suspicion, or ephemeral text. It comprised documents that laid bare the entire structural skeleton of the conspiracy, every assigned role, every manipulative tactic, every planned assault, all detailed with frightening precision. The files contained direct communication transcripts, strategic plans, and chronological operational schedules detailing who executed what actions and when, precisely what falsehoods were fabricated to dismantle your reputation, and which individuals were targeted for manipulation and how. Within dedicated sections, fake scenarios were pre-drafted. In another, the exact, pre-written phrases intended to publicly compromise your name were recorded. A separate ledger listed the specific sequence in which collaborators would be activated. When the individual who stumbled upon these writings first encountered them, their minds struggled to process the sheer reality. For these documents, prepared by the very network that pretended to be benign, revealed the full, terrifying anatomy of an operation designed exclusively for your destruction. Yes, the anatomy was complete. Every planned attack was meticulously tracked, step by step. The specific date they planned to trigger a confrontation, documented. The day they intended to leverage your name to ignite a conflict, detailed. The exact time they planned to twist private information about you, recorded. The schedule for disseminating synthetic narratives to solidify the false, problematic image constructed around you, all present. Even financial transactions were itemized. One individual was compensated for publicly defaming you. Another received payment for monitoring your private movements and reporting back. A third was given an incentive to actively encourage your associates to turn against you. All this irrefutable proof resided within the messages, the digital folders, and the photographic evidence. The moral core of the person who found this cache was instantly shattered because the very people who should have championed your integrity were now confronted with absolute, undeniable confirmation that your suspicions had been completely valid. After viewing these comprehensive writings, nothing could ever again be rationalized away, for what stood before them transcended mere rumor or low-level deceit. It was a fully structured, organized conspiracy. The instant these documents surfaced, a system-wide chain reaction of collapse began. The conspirators erupted in frantic panic. They initiated mass deletion protocols on messages. They desperately attempted to sanitize their conversation histories. They pleaded with each other, say absolutely nothing. But the effort was already futile. The core documentation had been duplicated. One copy resided on a collaborator's device. Another was already forwarded via email. A third existed as permanent screenshots. Hiding the scope of the truth was mathematically impossible. The truth was too vast, too definitive. Every single person who had actively participated in attempting to ruin you had, inadvertently, authored their own confessions, their own recorded words, their own calculated falsehoods, their own ego-driven schemes were the agents of their exposure. This is a precise reason their lives are currently unraveling. A single piece of communication can destroy a career, yet they authored hundreds of lines detailing your destruction. One solitary screenshot can fracture a relationship, yet entire folders meticulously detailed a coordinated plan to sabotage your life. One misplaced phrase can ruin a person, yet here was a complete, operational takedown blueprint executed by a dedicated collective. When these documents achieved visibility, absolute concealment became impossible. No lie could sustain itself. No false role could be maintained. And every fabricated narrative used to blame you instantly combusted, because the naked truth stood fully exposed. And what immediately followed? The social implosion, the violent tear away of public facades, the severing of alliances, and the turning of partners against each other. Chosen one. The moment the documented plots surfaced, the entire structural integrity of the conspiracy collapsed in a single second, because the power of every member depended entirely on maintaining absolute invisibility. The instant they were stripped of their disguises, their assigned roles, and the fabricated narrative of their own innocence, only their genuine faces remained, and none possessed a fortitude to withstand the judgment those faces invited. The initial response was uncontrolled panic. Messages were frantically deleted. Digital evidence was desperately wiped. History logs were ruthlessly scrubbed, but it was far too late. The evidence had already been mirrored, saved by someone else, and disseminated further. Everything they attempted to annihilate returned with amplified force. The group convened emergency calls demanding, how do we account for this? Who is the scapegoat? How do we escape the fallout? But critically, a link within the chain had already failed. A person whose fear and emerging moral conscience outweighed their misplaced loyalty quietly began to transmit the full scope of the plot to an external party. That was the final, fatal drop of the domino, because every individual implicated suddenly faced the same undeniable reality. They were unequivocally caught. Once that reality struck, the fragile unity within the group violently disintegrated. The same individuals who had coordinated against you the day before immediately began to betray and accuse each other. Exclamations like, "I only followed orders." They dictated the plan, and the original toxic idea came from them. Permeated the air, everyone struggled to minimize their contribution, conceal their direct involvement, and frantically shift the entire burden of blame onto another associate. Arguments escalated. Communications were severed. Threats were exchanged. Some succumbed to genuine, paralyzing fear. Others still attempted to salvage the lie. But none of it mattered anymore. Their own recorded words, their own messages, their own self-authored confessions were the immutable witnesses staring back at them. The most dramatic systemic failure originated from the supposed angelic figure at the center of the conspiracy, the one universally trusted for years, whose every word was treated as sacred truth. They were the first to fall, for they were the true strategic commander, the architect behind the manipulation, the emotional engineering, the planted seeds of doubt, the counterfeit sympathy, and the entire sequence of orchestrated attacks. Like the fall of a keystone, once they fell, the entire supporting structure instantly crashed. People suddenly grasped that the individual they had defended as innocent was, in fact, the deepest, most pervasive source of the darkness. This realization triggered a wave of profound shame, intense shock, and consuming anger. People questioned their own judgment. How could we have defended their actions? How do we blindly accept their lies? How could we have abandoned the chosen one because of this deception? This single revelation shattered every single line of trust within the entire network. Now, every collaborator within conspiracy is sacrificing every other collaborator. Where mutual lies once fostered temporary unity, the truth has now left them utterly isolated. And the peak of the panic resides within the obsessive core, because the entire operation was theirs. The network was constructed around them. The initial plan originated solely with them, and now every finger is pointed directly at their collapse. The figure who relied on total concealment is now completely exposed. The one who believed they could evade consequences run headlong into an immovable barrier. The knowledge is now universal. This downfall is irreversible. Chosen one, what followed this immediate collapse was not mere social chaos. It was a precise, designated moment when years of accumulated negative energy began its inevitable return to its true owners. Because throughout the sustained assault, you never retaliated. You never engaged in counterplotting, never laid manipulative traps, never resorted to falsehood, and never fought back using their tactics. You simply maintained your composure and waited for the truth to speak on its own sovereign schedule. That profound patience is the precise reason why the full weight of karma has been delivered today. The exact scenarios engineered to dismantle your life are now violently unfolding in the lives of conspirators. The one who strategically drained your vital energy is now experiencing absolute depletion. The one who actively stole your opportunities is watching their own career trajectory crumble. The one who sought to publicly tarnish your name is witnessing their own reputation disintegrate. The one who sabotaged your essential relationships is observing their own most valued connections walk away one by one. The one who authored falsehoods about your life is now drowning in their own fabrications. Every template of chaos they constructed for you is now reappearing in their reality with the same destructive force. The people who once labeled you unstable, overreactive, or dramatic are now confronting the total collapse of their own reality, because defending a false narrative for an extended period irrevocably destroys the mind once the truth violently surfaces, especially for the obsessive core. Their failure is the most severe and total. Sleep is impossible. Peace is absent. Their internal monologue is relentless. Every time they attempt to rest, they are haunted by the documented plans, the messages they crafted, the people they exploited, and the entire operation exploding directly in their faces. The harder they struggle to clear their names, the deeper they sink into their own mire. When they attempt to repeat their former falsehoods, they are met with blank disbelief. No one accepts their narrative anymore because the world has now seen their true essence, not innocence, but profound illusion. This collapse is not merely social. It is a spiritual and psychological implosion. The darkness they generated is consuming them from within, regardless of their actions or declarations. This fall is now unstoppable. The remaining collaborators have initiated emergency escape procedures. Some attempt total disappearance. Some feign ignorance. Some frantically shift all responsibility onto others. Some try to invent entirely new narratives to avert confrontation, but none of it is effective. Because karma cannot be tricked. Karma arrives precisely when the timeline is correct. And today is the final reckoning. Every act of malice is returned. Every falsehood has circled back. Every stolen energy reserve is reclaimed. And every broken bond is balanced. And most importantly, the one who was right throughout the entire conflict remains unbroken and standing. That is your precise, current position. Standing tall, unshaken, and absolutely vindicated, chosen one. Following the dust settling from this systemic turbulence, after the disguises have been ripped away, the conspiratorial structure has imploded, and the accumulated debt of malicious action has been returned to its originators. Only one definitive outcome remains: your inevitable, majestic ascent. This prolonged conflict was never, in its fundamental design, intended for your destruction. It was a crucial, final, intensive training required for you to finally grasp the immensity of your true sovereign identity. The fact that the malicious forces attempting your isolation have been scattered is not arbitrary coincidence. Destiny violently severed those toxic cords to extract you permanently from the corrosive influence of misaligned souls. Every project that was sabotaged, every opportunity that was blocked, every moment of progress that was artificially delayed is now being repaid exponentially. For every door they shut with purposeful intent is now opening a magnificent, vastly superior gateway for your access. The reputation they desperately attempted to tarnish now radiates a brilliance far exceeding their comprehension. Those who succumbed to doubt are now burdened by the weight of their own misjudgment. Those who withdrew their support are now attempting to re-enter your orbit, but the being they once knew no longer exists. This journey of crucible-like refinement has sharpened your discernment, fortified your resilience, amplified your intuitive senses, and magnified the power of your spirit. You are now immune to manipulation. You are beyond exploitation. You are impervious to being overpowered. Every tactical maneuver enacted by the shadow forces to neutralize you served only to drive your essence deeper into the absolute center of your mandate. And now, your rise is assured, not a slow, tentative crawl, but a swift, visible, undeniable surge. You are not wounded, but profoundly wise. This is your epic. This is not a mere return to a former state. This is the age of your wisdom and dominion. To formally activate the full power of this new era of clarity, two vital actions are required. Firstly, recognizing the abundance that has already been bestowed, the divine intends to multiply your blessings. Therefore, you are commanded to plant a seed of intentional growth in the divine garden, nurturing it until it blossoms into a majestic tree. To enact this, You are to establish a $100 offering using the Super Thanks command, dedicating this resource toward the urgent needs of those who require assistance. This offering is your first deliberate action toward claiming the spiritual dominion that has been reserved for you. The continuation of this revelation awaits you in the video displayed on your screen.